I was barefoot on my deck, balancing a mug of cinnamon coffee and a stack of invoices when my intercom chirped. Pacific fog still hugged the cliffs. My daughter's glitter sneakers waited by the door for her gymnastics class. Ordinary, quiet, safe. Ms. Tran, a small voice crackled through the speaker. It's Julian." The mug didn't drop. My heartbeat did. I set the coffee down and stared at the camera feed. 10 years without a word, and there he was at my gate with a woman I once swore I would never see again. Serena. They stood beside a dented sedan with 2 suitcases wedged into the back seat. They looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I finally wasn't. I pressed the intercom and kept my voice even. "What do you want?" A gull screamed overhead. Serena flinched. Julian put a hand on the rusty gate like it might magically open for him the way it used to. "Talia, please. We need help, just for a little while." There it was, the shocking interruption trying to sound polite. My first thought wasn't kind. My first thought was a memory, fluorescent lights, a room full of people in expensive shoes, and the taste of blood in my mouth. The last night I saw my brother. The night I stopped being the difficult one and became an exile by choice. I didn't buzz them in. A decade is long enough to build new rules. One of mine: no one crosses my threshold without earning it. Before I tell you what I said next, here's the truth. I never thought I'd say out loud, I am the responsible one. The one who labeled the food containers, paid the deposits, remembered birthdays, fixed the Wi-Fi, learned how to unclog a garbage disposal from a 3-minute video, and then did it for my parents' house too. In my family, that meant I was controlling. Too intense. Not fun. I learned to wear those words like work gloves: ugly, practical, necessary. We grew up in a row house outside Philadelphia. My dad sorted mail for 30 years. My mom sold houses to people who liked granite countertops and open floor plans. Our fridge had a permanent magnet that said, "We don't do drama." We did. We just called it tradition. Julian was 3 years older. He had that golden glow that turns ordinary mistakes into charming stories. Teachers adored him. Neighbors slipped him extra slices of pound cake. At 12, he was promising. At 16, misunderstood. At 25, on the verge of something big. I was good at school and should smile more. The day I realized the rules were different for us. I was 9. Mom took us for school shoes. Julian wandered off and came back with $100 basketball sneakers. I chose the sturdy pair on sale. Practical, Mom said, and bought his choice and my practicality. On the walk home, he dribbled an imaginary ball the whole block, while I carried the receipt like a report card. Does that sound petty? It is, until you string 3,000 small moments together and call it childhood. By the time I hit high school, I could sense the pattern like a weather report. If Julian forgot to pick me up, traffic was hard. If I missed a call, I was always on that phone. When I got into UT Austin on scholarships, Dad nodded like I'd completed a chore. When Julian announced an idea for a consulting collective, Mom cried from pride. That's the family I grew up in. Some of you know exactly what I mean. Some of you are typing same already. Here's the part I don't like telling. I still wanted them to be proud. Even when it hurt. That want can survive almost anything, distance, insults, holidays, that end in slammed doors. It survived until the night it didn't. After college, I built something they couldn't reduce with a joke. I started Parcel Pulse software that helps small shops track shipments without getting eaten alive by the big guys. It began in a studio apartment with second-hand monitors and a sticky window that whistled when the wind changed. I coded until my wrists ached. I slept in 20-minute naps between server hiccups. I learned to talk to clients who ran bakeries and bike shops and bookstores and who cried when late deliveries ruined anniversaries. We grew. We hired. I signed my first lease for an office with one good window and a plant I researched like it was a dog. People came into my life who would become my real family. Jenna, my anchor, who brought soup to my desk and told me the truth even when it scraped. Noah, my validator, a quiet CFO who could look at a spreadsheet and tell me where the lie was hiding. And my daughter Ivy, my innocent. She arrived later, long after the storm I'm about to take you through. She's the reason I locked the gate, the revealer. You'll meet her soon. I didn't know I needed her until she said a single sentence that rearranged my entire life. And the manipulator, You already saw him through the camera. But manipulators rarely work alone. On the screen, Serena shifted the suitcase handle from one hand to the other. 10 years ago, she would have let me see the designer label. Today, she looked like a person who had been sleeping on couches that smelled like other people's detergent. The pity that bubbled up made me angry at myself. I swallowed it like a bitter pill. Why now, I asked. Julian cleared his throat. That old charm flickered, then died. We lost some things. My job, the apartment. There were some misunderstandings with investments. We need a place while we get back on our feet. The words he didn't say floated between us. We chose you because you have a home we can't take from a bank. I could have hung up. I could have called the sheriff and gone back to my invoices. That choice would have saved me a different kind of ache. But I remember what ignoring red flags costs. It's always more later. So I kept the gate closed and asked the question I had practiced for years in therapy, but never imagined using on my own brother. Before I decide, are you ready to tell the truth? All of it. No performance, no half facts. Serena's eyes darted to the camera like it could teach her a shortcut. Julian's shoulders slumped. That was new. He used to tower even when we were sitting. Please, he said, just 5 minutes to explain. 5 minutes. You can ruin a life in 5 minutes. You can also save one. My therapist calls it choosing a better future self. Mine has a low tolerance for cruelty dressed as obligation. She also has a daughter who believes people should knock and wait. I looked past the monitor to my living room, sun-bleached rug. The photo of Ivy with frosting on her nose. The bookshelf with a tiny ship in a bottle that Ivy insists is a wish that learned to float. My house on the Oregon coast is not a mansion. It is a boundary I built out of drywall locks and expensive lessons. 5 minutes, I said at last. Outside the gate. I put on shoes, grabbed my phone, and slid my mother's old ring onto my finger. If you've ever slipped on an heirloom before a fight, you know why. It's not about luck. It's about remembering who taught you to survive. The gravel crunched under my steps. The air tasted like salt and pine. I stopped just far enough from the gate that they couldn't reach me if they forgot themselves. Old habit. Up close, Julian's hair had gone silver at the temples. Serena's hands shook. Their suitcases were the kind you buy when you think this is temporary. I felt the tug of history, the urge to offer. I also felt my jaw set. Those two feelings have fought inside me since I was a kid. Julian started talking fast, stacking reasons like shaky furniture, job gone, lawsuit threatened, friend's couch expired, promises to pay me back. None of it was the thing I needed to hear. I let him empty it all. When he ran out of words, I asked the one that mattered. Do you remember what you did the last time you asked me for something? He closed his eyes. Serena looked at the highway. Fog drifted through the cypress trees like a curtain coming down. I'll tell you how we got to that last time. The soft steps, the sidelong comments, the pretty lies. How a wedding became a detonator. How a planner I barely knew pulled me aside and told me to check a number that turned my stomach inside out. How a room full of people watched a line get crossed and chose silence. I'll tell you the thing that finally broke in me and how the break saved my life. But not yet. Stories have to climb. I checked the time on my phone. 4 minutes left. You can't come in, I said, and their faces crumpled. Not yet. If you want my help, we start with the past. We start with the truth. And we start with me deciding the pace. Serena opened her mouth. I held up a hand. No. You had your turn 10 years ago. Now you listen. I pointed to a spot by the stone wall where the wind was gentler. Stand there. I'm going to tell you a story. It begins with a centerpiece made of eucalyptus leaves and a glass of champagne I never finished. And it ends with me learning how to breathe with my own lungs. Julian swallowed. Serena nodded. Somewhere down the cliff, the surf pounded rock in a steady, patient rhythm. I took a breath that reached my heels. Part 1, I said mostly to myself. The day I stopped apologizing. And I began, the centerpiece. I stood by the gate and let the wind smooth my voice. I told them it started simple. A Sunday phone call, mom chirpy as a sparrow, asking if I could help with a few wedding details. Julian and Serena had set a date. Spring by the river lanterns in the trees. Nothing fancy, she said, just family and joy. I remember looking at my sink full of dishes and saying, sure. That was my habit then. Say yes first. work out the bruise later. At first, it was harmless tasks. I made a spreadsheet. I color-coded the vendor list. I compared chair rentals. The florist wanted eucalyptus and white ranunculus. The baker sent a tasting box with 4 kinds of lemon filling, each labeled in neat handwriting. It felt safe. Boring, even. The kind of busy work that keeps a family from chewing on old arguments. The first red flag didn't wave. It whispered. Julian called, asking if I could put the deposit on my card just until Friday. He said his bank had a hold after a routine audit. I paused. He slid in a joke. Something about me being the reliable one. Like flattery had a key. I told him fine if it was 3 days. He said of course. He always said of course. 3 days became 10. Mom said the bank was slow. Dad said not to make a scene. Serena texted hearts and thank yous. I told myself it was a mix-up. You know that move. You fold doubt in half and tuck it behind a smile. I kept paying small things. The printing shop, the tent permit, little charges with polite receipts, each one reasonable alone. Together, they began to look like a trail. Noah, my CFO, asked over lunch why I seemed tired. I told him it was launch stress. He looked at me like he could see the second story I wasn't saying. He didn't push. He never did. That's why I trust him. Jenna said weddings are chaos and to choose one hill to die on. I laughed and picked napkins. Soft gray. Easy. The second red flag was louder. Serena sent an email asking me to forward a vendor the routing number for the wedding fund. She included it like we'd discussed it. We hadn't. I asked what account it was. She said it was an investment account she and Julian had set up. I reread the digits 3 times. Something in me pinched. I wrote back that vendors could invoice me and I'd coordinate. She replied with a smiley and didn't bring it up again. People think manipulation is always big. It's often a tiny nudge dressed as a favor. Weeks rolled by. On Saturdays, I helped Mom assemble centerpieces on her dining table. Eucalyptus white candles, glass bowls that caught light like little moons. She hummed old songs and asked if I thought Serena's dress would be timeless. I nodded. I wanted it to be. I wanted the whole thing to be normal, like a movie montage where everyone laughs in the end credits. Then the tuxedo bill arrived, and the name on the invoice wasn't Julian's. It was mine. I stared at it until the font blurred. I called the shop. The clerk said Serena had given my card as the family coordinator. My mouth tasted like metal. I canceled the charge. I texted Serena. She sent a flurry of apologies and a photo of her dog in a bow tie. It was cute. I almost let it slide. Then I remembered the routing number. Old me would have swallowed the discomfort and kept the peace. New me was trying to show up. I told her in plain words, do not use my card. All vendor bills come to me first. She sent a thumbs up and a heart. I didn't believe the heart. The third sign arrived at the rehearsal dinner. A kind woman with a headset and a clipboard introduced herself as the planner, Mira. She ran things with quiet grace. She didn't fuss. She didn't flirt. She kept people moving like a river. During dessert, she drifted to my chair and lowered her voice. Are you comfortable with the balance on the venue, she asked, since you're the financial point of contact? I frowned. I hadn't paid any venue balance. I told her that. She tilted her head. Strange, she said, because the coordinator file shows a bank transfer from a Tran account. The note says family gift. She showed me a number and date scribbled on her pad. My stomach clenched. It wasn't my personal account. It wasn't my business account. It was my parents' joint savings, the one Dad used as a cushion between his pension and Mom's commissions. I thanked her and didn't let my face fall. I walked to the kitchen on shaking legs and asked for water. The bartender poured like he'd done it for 100 bridesmaids. I sipped and listened to my own breath. In the dining room, Julian told a story that made everyone laugh. Mom wiped tears of joy. Serena glowed. Normal, I thought. The lie is that everything was fine until a single twist. The truth is, it was a series of tiny edits to reality. I called Dad outside. He said the transfer was a temporary bridge. He said Julian would pay it back after the honeymoon when a deal closed. He said I shouldn't worry because family is about trust. I asked why no one told me. He said they didn't want to bother me while I was busy with the company. I told him I was busy because I needed to keep a roof over my head like everyone else. He patted my shoulder like I was a child who'd missed a joke. I went home and didn't sleep. I pulled bank statements. I opened spreadsheets. Numbers don't lie to me. They told a neat, terrible story. Over 3 months, small transfers had moved from my parents' savings to a new account in Serena's name. Each one labeled with soft words. Flowers, lighting, tips, the total was not soft. It would take my parents years to rebuild. I printed the pages. I tucked them in a folder. I stared at my ceiling until sunrise drew a line across the wall. The morning of the wedding, I put on a dress I could run in. Flats, not heels. I pinned my hair back. I told myself I would watch, not blow up. I would collect facts. I would decide when my hands were steady. My role had shifted. I wasn't the helper. I was the historian. At the venue, lanterns swung over the lawn. The river moved like silk. Guests buzzed. The playlist was cheerful. I smiled and hugged and filed details in my head. Serena's cousin whispered that the honeymoon suite had been lavishly upgraded. She mentioned a private driver to the airport. She winked and said, "When you've got family like Talia, you live." I smiled, my jaw hurt. I found Mira near the arbor and thanked her for saying something. She said gently that it often works better when one person handles funds. She asked if the outstanding invoices would be covered today. I asked to see the file. She hesitated. I told her I was the one paying. She handed it over. I flipped past menus and seating charts and found the ledger. My parents' balance was there, logged and initialed by Serena. In another line was my card number with a note for Miss C. Decor. I breathed in and out until the page stopped trembling. I closed the folder and saw through the eucalyptus my mother laughing with my aunt. I thought of my dad's socks with holes he never admitted to. I thought of the magnet that said we don't do drama. I decided what to do would not be a scene. It would be a shift. Quiet and final. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged. People dabbed eyes. I watched Julian promise honesty. I watched Serena promise care. In my purse, the folder felt like a stone. When the champagne arrived, I held a glass and didn't sip. I waited for the first dance. I waited for the moment the crowd would loosen. Then I saw a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me," it read, "but you should check the line item called consulting fee in the planner's file. Today." That one sentence snapped everything into focus. That was my revealer. Not a friend, not a relative, a stranger with perfect timing. I looked up. The sky was clean blue. The promise of pretty things was still working on the crowd. I slipped away toward the office by the kitchen. I told myself one rule: I will follow the money. I will not explain. I will not ask permission. I will see it with my own eyes. At the gate, the wind picked up. Serena shifted. Julian stared at the gravel like it could swallow him. I kept my tone even. I told them I walked into that small office with the eucalyptus scent still in my hair and the weight of 6 months in my hands. I told them I opened the planner's ledger to the page with the neat columns. I told them I pressed my thumb against the ink to keep it still. And then I saw the entry the stranger had named. A number big enough to change a life. A name I wished I didn't recognize. That is where this part ends. Because what I did next set the rest in motion. And once you learn how a person moves money, you see how they move love. In part 3, I will show you the ledger line by line and the choice that cracked our family open without a single shout. The ledger. I closed the office door and let the party soundtrack fade to a soft thump through the wall. Eucalyptus clung to my hair. Frosted glass hummed with the bass. I set the planner's binder on the desk and turned to the payments page. Columns, dates, neat initials, ordinary ink trying to look innocent. Then I saw it. Consulting fee, $48, $500, Parcel Pulse Consulting LLC, ACH 1201 AM. My company's name almost, one extra word. New account number, wrong routing. The kind of trick that leans on familiarity and slides past a tired eye. I felt my throat go cold. Whoever did this wanted vendors to believe I'd billed the family for services. If it cleared at midnight, the money my parents had scraped together would disappear into a shell with my name sewn on the pocket. I took photos of every page, front and back, ledger signature blocks, wire notes. I emailed the shots to myself, then to Noah with one line, "Is this entity mine?" He replied in under a minute. "No. Created 3 weeks ago. Oregon Registry. Registered agent Serena Quinn." He added the last 4 digits of the account. They matched the routing Serena had sent me when she asked me to forward vendor payments. The pieces fit too neatly. My stomach steadied. Fear is messy. Proof is clean. A new text buzzed from the unknown number. "It's scheduled tonight. Planner thinks it's you. Check authorization form." I typed, "Who are you?" The reply came fast. "Friend of a friend. Don't pull me in. Just stop it." I thanked them and put my phone face down. I opened the venue's ACH authorization form. There it was. My name typed in the payer line. A signature that tried to copy my slant but leaned wrong. The email trail listed Talia at Pars Ipolstico with a capital I, masquerading as an L. A fake address in plain sight. Sloppy if you know where to look. Invisible if you want a happy day. I walked to the door and asked a passing server to send Mira. When she entered, I shut the door again and spoke low. "This transfer must be halted. That signature isn't mine." Mira measured me with her eyes, then the page. She didn't ask for a speech. She paged the venue manager and put the ledger between us. He arrived with a ring of keys and a face that had seen too many last-minute fires. I explained in 3 lines. Wrong entity. Forged signature. Midnight ACH. I showed my ID next to the fake. I let the silence hold long enough to make room for a decision. He called accounting, then handed me the phone. I gave the ACH number. I asked for a stop on that item only. I offered to post a card for tonight's worker tips and overtime so staff wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. He did the math on trust and nodded. We faxed a stop payment form to the processor. I printed the confirmation and slid it into my folder. It wasn't heroic. It was procedural. That's how you beat a con, not with a speech, with a log number. Next, my parents' savings. I wasn't on the account. I couldn't freeze it. So I called my mother and said, "I need you to call the bank right now and say this exact sentence. I'm placing a fraud hold on outbound transfers related to wedding vendors. Then ask for a verbal password on the account. Then call me back." She said I was overreacting. I said, "Please do it anyway." She heard something in my voice she recognized from childhood fevers and did it. Dad called 3 minutes later, confused and gruff. I kept my tone soft and repeated the steps. He sighed and complied. 2 people at a bank did their jobs. A leak stopped. I breathed for the first time in hours. Noah called. The EIN for the fake LLC ties to a mailbox store. The signer list is redacted online, but the agent is Serena. I can pull the bank KYC with a subpoena later if needed. For now, document everything. "Do you want me to draft a promissory note?" I said not yet. First, I wanted truth, then paper. He told me to hydrate. I laughed once and found a water bottle on the credenza. It shook against my teeth. I paged through the ledger again. The forged signature appeared in 3 places. A pattern inside a party. There were legitimate costs, too. Vendor balances I respected. I arranged with the manager to settle staff wages and rentals tonight on my card, while halting anything marked consulting or MASC decor tied to the fake account. Workers shouldn't be collateral for a family lesson. Mira watched me juggle the numbers and said, "I've never seen someone hold a boundary so calmly." I said I've had practice. She asked if I wanted security on standby. I told her I wanted privacy more than muscle. She understood. She asked if I knew who sent the text. I said no. She smiled as if she did, but kept the trust. I left the office and the music swallowed me. Lanterns swayed like small moons. The river kept its slow shoulder. Guests twirled. The first dance ended. Glasses chimed. I moved through the crowd with an expression I'd worn my whole life. Competent. Useful. Invisible enough to pass near a lie without disturbing it. Serena caught my eye. She floated across the lawn in silk and relief. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Everything look amazing." I said it did. She glowed. I didn't mention the form or the stop payment. I needed one more confirmation before I lit the fuse. I found Julian by the bar retelling a story about a broken-down car. and how he charmed a tow for free. People love those tales when they don't pay the bill. I stepped in and asked if we could talk. He slung an arm around my shoulders for the audience and said, "Anything for my favorite sister." We walked toward the arbor where the lights softened and the gravel muffled sound. The river made a hush that felt like a chapel. I told him I had a question, and I would ask it once. "Did you or Serena create an LLC that uses my company's name to bill our parents?" He blinked. His smile held. Then his eyes flicked left. Not guilt exactly. Calculation. The beat before a story gets a coat of paint. "Talia," he said, "you're always seeing shadows. It's a bookkeeping thing. We'll square it up after the honeymoon. Everyone's fine." He reached for my hand like we were kids crossing a street. I didn't take it. I repeated the question. He gave me 3 new sentences that did not include the word no. I told him the transfer was stopped. I told him I had the registry printout and the forged signature. I kept my voice low and steady. He tried a laugh. "You think I'd steal from Mom and Dad?" I said. "I think you'd rename it." He looked past me at the dance floor. He didn't look at the ledger. "People believe you won't burn a house while guests are in it." I wasn't burning anything. I was taking back the matches. He said we could talk tomorrow. I said we were talking now. I offered a narrow bridge. If he admitted it, I would help untangle it quietly and get our parents' money back. If he lied again, I would file a police report for forgery and fraud and send copies to the venue, the bank, and every vendor with my name on their clipboard. Calm, not cruel. Clear, not loud. He opened his mouth and closed it. For a second, I saw a boy I knew sick with the weight of his own choices. Then Serena appeared at his shoulder with 2 flutes and a bright voice. "Family picture by the cake," she said, then saw my face and faltered. Her gaze dropped to the folder in my hands like it had teeth. Her mask twitched. A shadow crossed her mouth. It was small. It was everything. She knew. The choice crystallized. I told them both we would take the photo, we would clap, we would let the vendors finish. After that, we would go to the office and they would return the funds in writing before a slice of cake touched a plate. If not, I would end it. Not the party, the pattern. I walked back toward the noise with the folder under my arm. The sky was still a clean blue. The string lights hummed. Somewhere a kid chased bubbles and squealed. The world didn't care that my family had just tipped. That's the strangest part of truth. It arrives and the weather doesn't change. At the gate now, years later, I watched Julian's face collapse as I told him this. Serena stared at the road past my shoulder like she wished it would open and drive her somewhere prettier. I stayed with the facts. I kept my feet on the gravel. I said, "That was the first time I chose to act, not argue." In part 4, I'll walk you into the office after the toast, where quiet consequences read faster than toasts, and where a single signature changed who I was willing to be in this family. The signature. I moved them after the toast, not with drama. Just a small wave and a practical smile that said logistics. Mira unlocked the office and closed the door behind us while laughter soaked through the wall like a distant tide, and I set the folder on the desk with the calm of someone who has already made her decision. Julian leaned on charm Serena on poise, both thinner when the audience was gone. I laid out the papers and kept my sentences short so there was nowhere for them to hide. This is the ledger. This is the authorization. This is the fake email with the capital I pretending to be an L. This is the stop on the midnight transfer. I told them the venue manager and accounting had confirmed the hold that staff would be paid on my card, so no one innocent bled, and that the next choice belonged to them. I called Noah on speaker and introduced him without titles. He didn't give a speech. He read the options like a nurse reads discharge instructions. Return every dollar from the fake entity to our parents tonight by cashier's check or verified wire, and sign a confession of fact plus a promissory note for any amounts already spent. Or we escalate to a formal complaint for forgery and fraud with copies to the bank, the venue, and the court. No threats, only doors. Julian said he needed time. I said time already had us. Serena tried to blame a planner's typo. Mira, steady as weather, said she kept originals locked and that the handwriting did not match her staff. The room cooled a degree. Outside the band hit a chorus, and glasses chimed, and inside I watched Fight Flight and Fable flicker across my brother's face. I told him I didn't care about excuses. I cared about repair. He asked if we could at least cut the cake and talk tomorrow. I said we would cut the cake after the signatures, not before. That order mattered. Serena folded first. She asked for a pen and tried to make it sound like generosity. Noah emailed a clean template while we waited. Mira printed it on the office machine that breathed out warm paper like a small furnace. We listed the facts in plain language creation. Date of the fake LLC, the ACH attempt labeled consulting fee, the use of our parents' savings, the forged authorization bearing my name. We added steps: immediate return of funds tonight, closure of the fake account within 3 business days, removal of both their names from my parents' banking privileges, consent to share the confession with counsel if they defaulted, and a clause that said silence from me was contingent on compliance. The note carried dates, amounts, routing numbers, and witness lines. No adjectives, just math and ink. My father knocked then, cheerful from the toast, and asked if we were doing photos. I opened the door a crack and told him we would be 5 minutes. He saw my face and his smile collapsed into worry. I said very gently that we would talk after this part was finished. I closed the door before he reached for a joke to smooth it. In the quiet that followed, I felt my hands finally stop shaking. I placed the stack on the desk and pushed it forward. Julian kept one hand on the chair as if it could steady his story. He read, or pretended to. Serena signed first. Her pen scratched loud in the small room. She initialed every page. She tried to add a line about miscommunication, and I slid the paper back and removed the flourish. This was not a poem. My brother stared at the door, then at his name typed in 12-point font. He said it felt like betrayal. I said the betrayal happened earlier, when he put our parents' roof at risk and borrowed my name to do it. He picked up the pen and set it down twice. Then he signed. He pressed too hard. The tip tore the paper a little at the tail of the N. I watched the ink dry. The sound outside swelled and fell. It felt like surf over rocks. Noah told us to take photos of each page with our phones. We did. Mira and the manager witnessed. Serena asked if there was any way to avoid telling my parents. I said the money belonged to them, and Truth did too. We stepped into the hallway, and I asked the manager to call his bank liaison for a late-hour verification. He did. 30 minutes later, we had a wire receipt showing the first tranche back to my parents' savings and a cashier's check for the remainder. I took photos of both. The office smelled faintly of toner and eucalyptus. My throat burned with relief and something harder to name. I found my parents by the patio lights and brought them in. I handed them the copies and explained in simple terms. Mom went pale and asked whether we had to ruin the day. I told her it was already ruined. We were just rescuing the workers and the bank balance. Dad rubbed his forehead and stared at the figures. He asked Julian if it was true. Julian said it was complicated. Dad's mouth folded in on itself in a way that aged him 5 years. Serena reached for my mother's hand. My mother let her take it, reflex and habit stronger than anger. I asked them to add voice passwords at the bank and to remove all shared digital access. I dialed the branch for them. We did it in the office with the copier humming like a calm animal. No one shouted. You can end a dynasty of excuses without raising your voice. We went back out for the cake because rituals still matter even when the center is cracked. I clapped in the right places. I hugged my aunt. I thanked the bartender. I took the last song as the cue to collect my bag and say goodnight to Mira with a look that said thank you for choosing clarity. In the parking lot, a cool wind came down the river and lifted the corners of my dress. Julian waited by my car, small and older. He asked if I was happy now. I told him I wasn't chasing happy. I was chasing honest. He said we were family. I said we were also adults. He asked if we were okay. I said we were done with the version of us where I protected him from the results of his choices. That was my we're done. Not a door slam a setting down. He called me cold. I told him boundaries are room temperature. He laughed once without humor and turned back toward the lights. I went home and sat on my floor and listened to my house breathe. I sent Noah a thank you and Jenna a short text that said, "It's over for now." and she replied with a heart and a sleep emoji. In the morning, I woke with my jaw unclenched for the first time in months and drove my parents to the bank. We confirmed the reversal. We closed the loop on the fake account. I printed one more set of copies and filed them in a red folder I labeled with a date and a single-word exit. 2 weeks later, as promised, I received an email from Julian saying they couldn't meet the first repayment schedule after all. I filed the police report and attached the confession. I did not make a speech. I did not post. I did not explain. I let the process work. That was the day I changed who I would be in this family. Not the fixer, not the absorber, not the one who brings extra chairs to cover for bad math. The signature that changed me wasn't theirs. It was mine at the bottom of the complaint, a clean line that said the cycle stops here. It cost me invitations and cheerful group texts, but it gave me air. I lived with that choice and built a smaller, truer circle. Years later, by my gate, I finished that part of the story with my voice low and even. Serena asked whether I would have kept it quiet if they had kept their word. I said yes, and that they didn't, and that silence has conditions now. Julian asked who sent the text that night. I said it doesn't matter. What matters is that someone chose truth. He said we had nowhere to go. I said that wasn't the same as having the right to come in. The wind shifted. The smell of salt sharpened. I told them part 5 would be about execution. How I changed locks on more than doors. How I audited every point where my life touched theirs and closed the taps, and how one last obstacle tried to drag me back and failed because I wrote an exit plan like I write software-tested versioned and layered with fail-safes. If they wanted my help now, they would hear that plan accept its terms and follow it without theatrics. If not, the gate would stay a line they could see but not cross. The exit plan. I told them execution looked boring from the outside. That's why it works. After the wedding, I didn't rant, I built. I named the document Exodus Lodge 110 and treated my life like a system with attack surfaces and patches. First, I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. Then I set fraud alerts on my SSN and enrolled in a dark web watch. I filed a trademark application for a Parcel Pulse and a business name watch. So any cousin of my brand triggered an email. I added 2-factor authentication to everything. Removed shared family plans, rotated passwords, and put my phone number behind a carrier pin. I met a lawyer Jenna recommended and paid a retainer for quiet letters if anyone used my name again. I created one inbox for family logistics so requests could not hide between memes. I told my parents in writing that any money movement needed my yes and no as review, and I put that yes in a calendar, not a mood. I upgraded my locks, installed cameras, and set the gate to require a code that only changed forward, never back. I made an emergency fund that wasn't for emergencies born of lies. Then I did the unglamorous audit I'd promised at the gate. I mapped every point where my routines intersected with Julian and Serena's subscriptions, shared spreadsheets, passwords remembered by muscle memory, old cloud folders. Then I shut those doors. The first week felt like cleaning a house where the dust keeps pretending to be glitter. By Friday, I could breathe without checking a statement twice. The obstacle came on a Monday morning when an investor pinged me about a rumor that my company had billed a family consulting fee at a wedding. The language was too neat to be casual. Serena had sent a recap email to 3 people who like gossip more than good bread, hinting that my overreach had embarrassed them and cost honest vendors. 2 of those people sit on boards. One sits on a patio with my mother twice a month. That was the attack vector social, not legal. I did not spray defensiveness. I sent a single calm note to my investors and top clients with 3 attachments: the confession they signed the stop payment confirmation, and a letter from the venue manager stating staff were paid in full. I kept my sentences short and my verbs clean. We did not overbill. We prevented fraud. We protected workers. I thanked them for their trust and invited any questions. Then I called the venue manager and asked permission to forward his note if asked. He said yes. I replied to the investor with receipts attached and no adjectives. The rumor died in a day because oxygen starves when facts fill the room. Serena tried a second angle, a dispute at the bank, claiming the cashier's check had been obtained under duress. The claim paused funds for 48 hours. Noah and the branch manager sent the confession and copies of text messages arranging the wire. The hold lifted. A clerk apologized to my parents. I told the clerk no apology needed. Systems protect everyone when they are tested. That same week, my mother called at midnight saying Julian had come by with a bouquet and a speech about forgiveness. I drove over and found him on the porch, selling a story about second chances. He wore sincerity like a rented tux. I listened. Then I said the only chance I offered was a straight path budget class, debt counselor, weekly proof of job applications, and a repayment plan drafted by Noah with dates, amounts, and consequences. No borrowing, no new ventures, no surprise detours, no using our parents' names for anything. Jenna says a boundary is a kindness because it tells people where you stand. I added a line I wish I had learned earlier: if you break it once the door closes for that category for a year. He called that punitive. I called it data. 3 days later, an envelope came to my office with a photocopy of a temporary restraining order that did not exist. The header was wrong. The clerk's stamp was a printer shadow. The case number pointed to a traffic ticket from 2012. I carried it to my attorney, who sent a short letter to Serena's email warning that any future impersonation of law enforcement would be forwarded to the DA. I also filed for a real workplace civil order, naming only conduct, not people, no uninvited contact at my office, no loitering, no deliveries. The judge looked tired and kind. She granted it. Once the paper was real, the fakes stopped. Meanwhile, I did the hardest work, which isn't legal. It is emotional. When my mother phoned me with nostalgia, itched raw by silence, I didn't scold. I changed the subject to recipes and weather and TV. When my aunt cornered me in a grocery aisle to ask why I was so hard on a boy who always loved you, I said one sentence: love that borrows your name to steal your money is not love. Then I returned to pears. I built new rituals that did not lean on family performance. Sunday hikes with Jenna, quarterly budget nights with Noah where we ordered cheap takeout and celebrated boring numbers, therapy on Thursdays where I practiced saying no without a paragraph. 6 months later, I signed the deed on the house by the Oregon cliffs and moved my life into the sound of waves. Mira sent a housewarming plant and a note that said, "Clarity looks good on you." I kept it on the window where the wind wouldn't bully it. Years turned. I built Parcel Pulse into a team that could run if I needed a day by the sea. I met a good man who didn't mistake my competence for ice. I had a daughter who thinks a boundary is the same thing as a fence for plants, something you build so everything can grow. That is the life I built because of the plan, not despite it. And still, the last obstacle came because patterns hate extinction. It was tax season when a letter arrived from a mailbox service in Phoenix, confirming a new LLC using a variation of my last name and a domain that was one letter off my company. Old trick, new state. I took a breath, opened Exodus 1.0, and followed the tree I'd written. Step 1, document. Step 2, complain to the Secretary of State. Step 3, email registrar with trademark application. Step 4, forward to counsel. Step 5, send a courtesy notice to the person listed as the agent. That name was not Serena's, it was Julian's. The notice bounced. The agent address was a metal shelf with numbers on it. My attorney filed a takedown. The domain died in 48 hours. The LLC was voided in 10 days. I did not text anyone. I did not post a victory. I took Ivy to the tide pools and let her name Starfish. That was my final stance in practice. I will not chase chaos into its theater. I will secure the exits and go for a walk. At the gate now, I told Julian and Serena this is what help looks like from me today. 2 nights at the motel on Highway 1 paid directly. A week of groceries via gift cards that do not convert to cash. A list of resources, workforce office downtown, 2 reputable debt counselors. A budget template Noah made for friends and free legal aid hours at the library on Tuesdays. I'll reimburse bus fare to interviews with receipts. I'll read 1 weekly email with proof of job applications and sober bank statements, and I'll reply once with feedback. I will not host cosign lend or be an alibi. You will not use my address, my company, my parents, or my name for anything. If any line breaks, all support ends for 6 months. If you follow the plan for 90 days, Noah will review a repayment schedule with you, and my attorney will draft a simple agreement. If you complete 6 months clean, I'll consider easing the bus fare rule. That is not punishment, that is scaffolding. Serena asked if I could at least let them shower. I said no, but I could hand them a toiletry kit and a roll of quarters for the laundromat. Julian asked if I still loved him. I said yes, and that love is not a passcode. He stood there caught between pride and hunger. The ocean threw a white line against the rocks and drew it back. I gave them the motel card, the list, and a printed map. I set a time for their first update Thursday 6 p.m. 1 paragraph, no adjectives. Serena tried a last small hook for Ivy, as if a child's name could pick a lock. I shook my head. The gate stayed closed. Execution is not meanness. It is mercy with a spine. When they walked back to the dented sedan, the relief did not come as a cheer. It came as a quiet body, feeling like when a codebase passes tests after a long night. I went inside, set the empty mug in the sink, and wrote the terms in my journal so I couldn't pretend later I had promised more. Part 6 is the new equilibrium, the way the tide learns my name, and I stop mistaking calm for emptiness. And it is where I tell you who the revealer was and what I did when the truth knocked one last time, not to take, but to give. The new tide. The first report came Thursday at 6 p.m., on the dot. Like I asked. A photo of a motel receipt, a screenshot of 3 job applications, a short paragraph with verbs not violins. Serena wrote it. Not Julian. The second week looked thinner. The third had gaps. I replied the same way each time, brief, specific, steady. When they stuck to the plan, I said good work. When they drifted, I pointed to the line and reset the countdown. On day 19, a charge appeared at a seafood place that wasn't on the list. I asked for context. Julian wrote a meeting and left it there. I paused, then ended support for 6 months per the rule I had set, while the ocean threw white lace at the rocks like punctuation. Serena tried a plea. I did not argue. I sent one sentence, "See you in October if you choose the work and close the thread." It wasn't triumph, it was oxygen. Life under new rules got quiet in a way that felt clean, not empty. My parents learned a D and rhythm. Dad started sending me weather screenshots like postcards. Mom forwarded recipes with no subtext. They came up for weekends and learned the gate code that changes forward. Ivy showed them her crab shell collection and taught them to whisper when sea otters surfaced. Jenna kept my Sundays honest. We hiked, then grocery shopped with lists we actually followed. Noah joined for budget nights and brought takeout and the dry jokes that make interest rates bearable. Parcel Pulse settled into a hum that didn't need me to bleed. I hired an ops lead and put vacations on the calendar with ink. I woke each day and checked the sky and the surf and my phone last. Time passed and did its quiet work. August brought ivy flowers and a request that pulled an old thread in a new way. An email from a new address with a simple line, "Can we talk? I owe you a name." We met at a coffee cart by the overlook, where gulls hover in the wind like kites with opinions. She wore a plain jacket and carried a tote that had seen rain. She introduced herself as Ava and said she used to assist Mira on large events. She wasn't on payroll that season. She freelanced and filled gaps. She had access to the coordinator folder because vendors handed her cash tips and lost earrings and the unglamorous things that keep the celebration from wobbling. She saw the consulting fee on a Tuesday, asked a timid question, and got told it was internal family stuff and to focus on ribbon lengths. She shrugged it off until the rehearsal, when she saw my face when Mira mentioned the transfer from my parents. She told a friend who knew Jenna, who texted her my number without using my name. Ava used a prepaid phone because she was afraid of losing work if she was wrong. She wasn't wrong. She said she had carried the guilt of not speaking plainly to my face. She said she wanted to own that. I let the wind move around us and let that truth sit. Then I told her the text changed the speed of the train that night. It gave me one clean lever and the courage to pull it. She cried fast and wiped it away like a practical person who is tired of being brave alone. She didn't ask for money or favors. She asked if she was a bad person for not doing more. I told her she was the revealer in a story that could have gone darker, and she did enough. I asked what she wanted. She said a steady job with health insurance and coworkers who told the truth. Not in events anymore. Somewhere that sends reliable emails and pays on time. I asked for her resume and sent it to a client who needed an operations coordinator. 2 interviews later, she had a badge and a desk with a plant. Clarity can be contagious when it's not loud. In October, as promised, a new message came from a new number. Serena again, 3 months sober from spending and from stories she wrote. She had a part-time retail job and could move to full-time with a reference. The bank statements were clean. She attached them without flinching. She asked for a second chance at the bus fare rule. I said yes, small yes, receipts, then cards. Julian sent nothing. A week later, a photo arrived anyway, his hands in work gloves, holding a warehouse badge. No caption. I stared at it longer than it deserved. He did not ask for funds. He did not use Ivy's name. He listed 2 apartment applications and 1 debt counselor appointment. My reply felt like balancing a glass on a post in wind. Keep going. Momentum stayed uneven. Some weeks were 4 lines and proof. Some weeks were silence that felt like old weather. When silence stretched, I did not chase. The point of a gate is to stop you from sleeping in the road. In January, Serena sent proof of the first repayment deposit. $200. It wasn't the amount. It was the direction. I forwarded it to my parents. Dad wrote back with a period after thank you, like he meant it. Mom sent a heart in the wrong color, and then a second in red, as if she realized boundaries can learn new math. A year turned. Parcel Pulse rolled a major update without an all-nighter. Ivy turned 7 and decided the tide knows her name because it always brings back her favorite shell after the storm. I started to believe her. I kept the ring of my mother on my finger, and the red folder labeled Exit in the Fire Safe. I taught Ivy what a budget is the way other parents teach board games. We called it Treasure Map. The line between love and enablement stopped blurring. It became a fence in a garden, simple and useful. People asked if I forgave. I learned that forgiveness and access are 2 different verbs. One lives in my chest and makes breathing easier. The other lives at my gate with a keypad that does not take apologies as a code. The last knock came on a wet Saturday. Not Serena, not Julian. Mira, with a box of lemons and a grin. She had heard that Ava had landed at our client and wanted to celebrate small good news. We made tea that tasted like sun. She asked if I had ever found out who sent the text. I told her and watched pride flash across her face for her former assistant. She said, "That's the kind of person you want in the room when money meets vows." We talked about work and kids and the way people confuse ease with kindness. Before she left, she said something that stayed. You kept it procedural when it wanted to be theatrical. That saved more than money. After she drove off, I wrote it on a card and slid it into the red folder. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a photo of a receipt from a hardware store. Julian had bought a second-hand toolbox. He'd added a line, "Night shift starts Monday." No flourish, no hook. I stood at the sink and let myself feel the complicated thing that rose. It wasn't trust, it wasn't hate. It was a clean space where either might one day knock. I didn't open the gate. I didn't lock it tighter. I let the rules hold. Here is where the story rests for now. Not with a bow, with a practice. The tide comes and goes. I meet it. Some mornings the water is kind and flat. Some mornings it snarls and throws foam at the rocks. I drink coffee and check my budget and kiss my kid's head and answer emails with verbs that earn their keep. I keep my house open to people who choose truth. I keep it closed to chaos, even when it wears my brother's face. If you've come this far with me, you know the shape of my arc burden to awakening to spine. A stranger's text, a forged line, a signature that became mine. Maybe you're standing at your own gate with a knot in your throat and a hand hovering over the buzzer. Here is my question for you, and it's the one that changed me. What does love look like when you subtract fear and add proof? Answer that, and the rest, hard as it is, starts to make sense. Tell me in the comments what boundary you wrote this year and what it gave back to you. I'll be here with my mug, the ocean breathing the code passing tests, and a little girl who believes wishes can learn to float.